Why my eyes, son? You've never used them before.
Here are some archived pages from Stuart Brand's Whole Earth catalog. According to Brand, the post-revolution utopia is not for everyone, only the enlightened quote-unquote children of the sun like Brand here, who wears the Crowleyan astral sphere on his forehead. In one issue, there's an article titled World Game, written by Brand's friend, Gene Youngblood. Buckminster Fuller was the guy who invented the geodesic domes like the ones depicted in the 70s sci-fi movie Logan's Run and used in Disney's Epcot Future City prototype. He was also big on cybernetics and mind control. The work that put Youngblood on the map was his book titled Expanded Cinema, of which Fuller wrote the introduction. The book details the use of cybernetics in video and film, in other words, creating sophisticated propaganda that impacts both the brain and central nervous system in order to alter the way people think and ultimately behave. Through the use of stunning quote-unquote consciousness-expanding cinematography, images that instill a sense of awe, like the ones used in 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was believed that creating a sense of awe was the equivalent of a religious experience, of experiencing God. Youngblood employed the use of pulsating repetitive sounds and lights, and the mixing of opposites, which he calls quote-unquote simultaneous perception of harmonic opposites, or synesthesis, to create cognitive dissonance and other physiological and emotional changes. Youngblood writes, quote, synesthetic and psychedelic mean approximately the same thing. It means the simultaneous perception of harmonic opposites. It's as old as the ancient Greeks who coined the term. Under the influence of mind-manifesting hallucinogens, one experiences synesthesia, in addition to what Dr. John Lilly calls quote-unquote white noise, or random signals in the control mechanism of the human biocomputer, end quote. Incidentally, John Lilly, contemporary of Gregory Bateson, was monstrous with his ideas and LSD experimentation in mind control, and wrote a book titled Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Biocomputer. This is the lunatic that conducted mind control experiments for the CIA and MK Ultra programs, that used LSD, mirrors, and flashing projected images, wrote a book titled Simulations of God, and dosed dolphins for NASA in the hopes that he could create mind-controlled weaponized aquatic animals, among other things. An example of synesthetics would be the dualistic use of a calm symphonic music score accompanying a bloody war massacre. Hollywood does this all the time. It takes something beautiful and happy and puts it with something foul and evil. This is intended to subvert the mind, change the brain. Change the brain, change the man. Get it? But change him into what exactly? In his book, he argues that a new expanded cinema is required for a new consciousness. Quote, expanded cinema isn't a movie at all. Like life, it's a process of becoming, man's ongoing historical drive to manifest his consciousness outside of his mind, in front of his eyes, end quote. In other words, simulacra and simulation. He describes television as the quote-unquote software of the planet, and that computers liberate man and amplify his intelligence.
Just relating back to your original assertion regarding technology making religion obsolete, can you really say that technology will answer the kind of timeless questions that religion is always supposed to be able to answer, like what happens after death, or more subjective questions regarding morality and things like that?
Yes, I think that experiences of awe are, for me, the most sort of transcendent experiences. I never had them from religion, but I certainly get them when I watch, the Hubble IMAX 3D film. And when you consider what the Hubble is, it's an instrument of man. It's an optic nerve floating in space that allows us to mainline the whole of time through our own optic nerves, to quote my friend Ross Anderson. And so when you consider what that does, to be able to gawk at all of space and time and fit that something as vast as that through something as small as our brain, to contemplate and push our perceptual boundaries to such a degree that we have to upgrade our mental schematic just to accommodate the scale of that experience, I say that expands our consciousness. I think that is a psychedelic experience. That is an experience of that which exceeds our intellectual capacity.
She wants to come back at you.
Which is what Joseph Campbell refers to as God to begin with, that which exceeds our intellectual capacity.
That idea of having a transcendent dimension is one of the key facets of religious identity.
Right, except religion is never based on any fact of science.
In an article from 2020, quote, Gene Youngblood's opus, Expanded Cinema, is a manifesto and a prophecy, end quote. He mentions some experiments that were conducted on public television. He says his references come from the Esalen Institute, the New Age think tank and quote-unquote humanistic education center located in Big Sur. It's run by Stanford University-trained psychologists and New Age psychonauts Michael Murphy and Dick Price. The institute was inspired by founding members like Aldous Huxley and Gnostic Luciferian and alchemist Frederick Spiegelberg, and of course populated with highbrow intellectuals. It's the birthplace of the quote-unquote human potential movement, which is this collective that attempt to cultivate superpowers like ESP, telekinesis, and remote viewing as part of human evolution into the Übermenschen, the superhuman. The article explains, quote, his fanatical forecasting, which sometimes lends itself to ahistoricity, meaning it's made-up hogwash. You catch a glint of Silicon Valley global village utopianism. It's not such a broad leap from Big Sur to Burning Man. For Youngblood, born in 1942, he and his approximate contemporaries represent a new stage in human evolution, blinking at the bright dawn of what he deems the Paleo-Cybernetic Age, end quote. In an article by Douglas Rushkoff, who wrote a book titled Team Human in 2019, he talks about the prevailing quote-unquote religion of Silicon Valley and how it's largely anti-human. He describes it as, quote, a techno-utopian and deeply anti-human sensibility, born out of a little-known confluence of American and Soviet New Age philosophers, scientists, and spiritualists, who met up in the 1980s hoping to prevent nuclear war, but who ended up hatching a worldview that's arguably as dangerous to the human future as any atom bomb, end quote. He pieced together his book through interviews with people involved in the Esalen Track 2 diplomacy program, which was intended to bring together leading scientists and spiritualists of both the USSR and the United States to the Esalen Institute. It was at Esalen where these people had brainstorming sessions that resulted in, quote, folks from Stanford Research Institute and Silicon Valley who would one day be responsible for funding and building our biggest technology firms, met up with Russia's cosmists. The cosmists were a big hit, and their promise of life extension technologies quickly overtook geopolitics as the primary goal of the conferences. Self-actualization through technology meant leaving the body behind, but that was okay, since, in keeping with the Gnostic tradition, the body was the source of human sin and corruption. The stuff robots and computers could reproduce was the best stuff about us anyway, end quote. He continues, quote, the cosmists talked about reassembling human beings atom by atom after death, moving one's consciousness into a robot and colonizing space. They believed human beings could not only transcend the limits of our mortal shell, but also manifest physically through new machines. With a compellingly optimistic, have your cake and eat it too gusto, the cosmists told America's LSD-taking spiritualists that technology could give them a way to beat death, end quote. Google is developing artificial intelligence to replace human consciousness with something far superior, AGI. Rushkoff further explains that the anti-human agenda works very neatly with the agenda of the global corporate oligarchy. Quote, each enables the other, reinforcing an abstract, growth-based scheme of infinite expansion, utterly incompatible with human life or the sustainability of our ecosystem. They both depend on a transcended climax where the chrysalis of matter is left behind and humanity is reborn as pure consciousness or pure capital, end quote.
Humanity basically learned to produce was all kinds of stuff like textiles and shoes and weapons and vehicles. And this was enough for very few countries that underwent the revolution fast enough to subjugate everybody else. What we're talking about now is like a second industrial revolution, but the product this time will not be textiles or machines or vehicles or even weapons. The product this time will be humans themselves. We're basically learning to produce bodies and minds. Bodies and minds are going to be, I think, the two main products of the next wave of all these changes, then this is far greater than anything we saw before in history. And this time, if you're not part of the revolution fast enough, then you probably become extinct.
Larry Page, Sergey Brin, and another self-proclaimed God-man and psychonaut, Jason Silva, helped finance Singularity University, founded by futurists Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis. Singularity University is a transhumanist think tank formed to peddle their nonsensical globalist ideas that they think will turn the world and later the entire universe into real-life Star Trek. Silva is one of the mouthpieces for this movement. Listen as he advocates not just for Singularity University, but for their machine god, whom they hope will run the world.
We're living in an age of technological disruption where every industry is being upended by exponential technologies. You might have heard the buzzword, yet most of us continue to be future blind, failing to see things coming. Now, in May 2007, renowned futurist Ray Kurzweil and space entrepreneur Peter Diamandis got together and started having a conversation. The conversation was the decision to create Singularity University, a university to bring together thinkers, academics, and entrepreneurs to address the grand challenges of humanity through an exponential lens. How does this change what we become capable of, right? In a world of doom and gloom, where if it bleeds, it leads, where if it bleeds, it leads, where if it bleeds, it leads. Most people think the world is going to hell. Yet on the back of exponential technologies, we could address the grand challenges of humanity and fix the world.
Diamandis preaches on the notion that human minds will soon be uploaded into a computer and therefore achieve immortality. He's a big advocate for brains in vats, Ready Player One style societies, where people build their own virtual worlds and subsist within them. He speaks of human biology in machine terms.
If I had to say my mission, it's to help inspire and guide the transformation of humanity on and off the Earth. Life began on this planet some billions of years ago. We're living on a planet of 4.5 billion years of age. And life itself is a technology, so to speak. It is a biological DNA-based encoding and technology that has been improving in its capabilities from prokaryotic, simple life to you and I that are a collection of 10 trillion cells. This improvement has been one that continues. It doesn't continue biologically. In other words, we're not evolving at a rapid rate as humans. We're evolving in society, and we're evolving our tools as technologists. This kind of technology will allow us to be godlike in our abilities, to be omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. We're going from individuals to a collected intelligence, a meta-intelligence.
I believe we're rapidly moving towards a world where all of these things that we use, that we need to be alive, if you would, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, are very rapidly trending towards zero cost. And it's going to change capitalism in a very fundamental fashion. So there's models for what this looks like, and one of the best models, believe it or not, is the early Star Trek world. Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, viewed that world as being sort of post-capitalism, where money had very little use, very little value. At the end of the day, in a world in which technologies like the replicator exists, your ability to actually create something and have something where scarcity no longer exists, where everything becomes abundant, changes the whole economic sphere of our world.
And I've thought about how the technology that we're creating today at an exponential rate, literally the human-machine interface technology of ultimately being able to plug in through optogenetics or human-machine chip interfaces, and the internet, of course, are giving us the ability to communicate in a much more intimate fashion where I think well within the next decade there's going to be the potential for me to know people's feelings and thoughts in a much more intimate fashion. And if all of a sudden we are becoming a species of 7 billion interconnected individuals, what I call a meta-intelligence, we are a new organism, just like, yes, we're 7 billion individuals, just like I'm a collection of 10 trillion individual cells. but these 10 trillion cells become conscious as an individual named Peter Diamandis. And I think that on this planet, we are alive during a period of evolutionary change, where we are going from a collection of billions of individuals to a connected populace of humans interfacing with an extraordinary amount of artificial intelligence, computational power that's around the internet, where we together are becoming what I call this meta-intelligence. And one thing about becoming more of a virtual persona is that there are an infinite number of frontiers. In fact, I can work eventually with my AI, my artificial intelligence, and create a world that is of the dream I want to live in, and go and live in that world. And I can be the king, of my own world, and invite people to come in and be part of that. And I can invite you to come and play in my world. And we're going to have an infinite number of realities we can start to explore. Other benefits include our ability to become a spacefaring species, where the physical limitations of accelerating things to the speed of light, or of really needing to, remain alive for longer than the normal human lifespan will change, and we become liberated for our ability to go and populate this galaxy and this universe and what may be an infinite number of universes.